Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the Print Talk. How are you doing, Kenneth?
Pretty good. What have we got today?
Okay, so we've got a pretty hefty stack of info here from about 3D printing and how it's going to, well, it sounds like it's going to completely change the supply chain.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing stuff, actually.
Yeah, we're not just talking about like those little plastic toys anymore.
No, not at all. This is serious stuff. We're talking about everything from custom phone cases to I saw an article in here about 3D printing houses.
Houses?
Yeah.
Like entire houses?
Entire houses, yeah. And the industry is just exploding. I mean, it's projected to hit $35.6 billion by 2024.
Whoa. Okay, so billion with a B? That's not a typo.
Not a typo, no. This is the real deal. This is the future of manufacturing, and we're kind of just seeing the tip of the iceberg right now.
Okay, so you got my attention for sure. But how exactly is 3D printing changing things? Can you give me an example that'll really drive it home for me?
Okay, so remember a couple years ago when the supply chain totally went haywire?
Oh yeah, everyone was freaking out.
Yeah, and everything was delayed. It was a mess.
Yeah, I remember trying to buy a new coffee maker, and it was back ordered for months.
Exactly. So imagine a major car company, right? They're about to launch their hot new model. And suddenly they can't get this one critical part because the factory that makes it is halfway across the world and it's shut down for some reason.
Oh no.
Yeah, it's a nightmare scenario, right?
Yeah.
But with 3D printing, they could just hit print on that part locally and keep the whole assembly line moving.
Wow. So instead of these massive warehouses and cargo ships, we could talk about 3D printing hubs all over the place, just churning out parts on demand.
Exactly. It's about resilience. You're not at the mercy of global shipping routes or geopolitical turmoil anymore.
That's pretty mind-blowing. But is that actually feasible? I mean, are companies actually doing this, or is this all still theoretical?
No, this is happening right now. One of the articles I read was talking about this company that completely shifted their production strategy because of those disruptions a few years ago. They went from relying on overseas manufacturers to producing all their critical components in-house using 3D printing.
Wow.
Yeah. And not only did they survive those disruptions, they actually ended up cutting down their lead time significantly.
Okay, hold on. You're using that jargon again. What's lead time in normal people speak?
Oh, right. Sorry. Lead time is basically the time it takes for a product to go from an idea in someone's head to actually being in your hands.
Okay.
So think about you're ordering a custom phone case online, right?
Mm-hmm.
With 3D printing, you could have that case on your doorstep in a couple of days instead of waiting weeks for it to be manufactured overseas and then shipped over.
Okay. So it's basically instant gratification for everything.
Pretty much. It's all about speed and efficiency.
I like the sound of that. So instead of mass producing thousands of phone cases and hoping they sell, companies can just print exactly what's needed when it's needed.
Exactly. It's a whole new way of thinking about manufacturing.
Okay, so this all sounds amazing, but what's the catch? There's got to be a downside, right?
There are always challenges, especially with a technology this transformative.
Okay, like what?
Cost is a big one. Industrial-grade 3D printers are complex pieces of machinery. They require specialized materials. It's a significant investment, especially for smaller businesses.
So is this technology only for the big players? Are we talking about a future where only mega corporations can afford to play in this 3D sandbox?
Not necessarily. I mean, think about it. 99% of manufacturing enterprises in the US are considered small manufacturers.
But only 99%?
Yeah, so there's a huge potential market for more accessible 3D printing solutions, and there are already a ton of companies popping up to meet that demand.
So it's not just about replacing traditional manufacturing, but also about creating a whole new ecosystem of smaller players who can now access these tools.
Exactly. Imagine a local entrepreneur with a great idea. They can design and print their product on demand, bypassing all those traditional barriers to entry. It's like the Wild West of manufacturing out there.
Wild West, huh? That sounds both exciting and kind of terrifying all at the same time.
Yeah, it's definitely going to be interesting to see how it all plays out.
So what are the implications of this shift in power dynamics? What happens when anyone can be a manufacturer?
Well, for one thing, we could see a resurgence of local production goods being made closer to the end consumer, reducing transportation costs and emissions.
So not just a manufacturing revolution, but a potential win for the environment as well.
Exactly.
Okay, so you're saying in the future, I could be rocking a pair of sneakers that were printed down the street, maybe even using recycled plastic from a local cleanup project or something.
It's not as far-fetched as it sounds. One of the articles I came across featured a company that's actually 3D printing furniture And get this, they're using wood waste from construction sites.
So instead of like those flat pack nightmares from who are, we're talking about unique, locally sourced furniture.
Yeah, exactly. And it's not just about being eco-friendly either. This company is creating these really cool designs that you wouldn't be able to replicate with traditional manufacturing methods.
Okay, so you've officially blown my mind. But this all sounds incredibly futuristic. Are we talking about a realistic vision of the near future here, or is this more like sci-fi fantasy land?
It's easy to get caught up in the hype, but 3D printing is already making serious inroads. We've talked about manufacturing and consumer goods, but this technology is also revolutionizing healthcare.
Oh yeah, how so?
Well, they're doing things like printing personalized prosthetics, which is amazing because it means you can create a prosthetic limb that's perfectly tailored to an individual's body.
Wow, that's incredible. What else?
They're even working on bioprinting organs, which is like...
Bioprinting organs. Hold on, we're talking about printing like a heart or a liver.
Well, it's still early stages. But yeah, that's the ultimate goal, to be able to print fully functional organs for transplantation.
Okay, now that's just next level stuff. But let's back up for a second. We've talked a lot about the potential benefits of 3D printing, but what about the potential downsides?
That's a really important question. And there are definitely challenges and ethical considerations that we need to address.
Like what?
One of the big ones is the potential impact on jobs.
Oh, right. Because if factories become fully automated, then what happens to all the workers?
Exactly. It's a question that comes up a lot, and it's not an easy one to answer.
So is it just a case of robots taking our jobs, or is it more nuanced than that?
It's definitely more nuanced. While some jobs might become automated, 3D printing will also create new job opportunities.
Okay, so it's not necessarily about jobs disappearing, but about the types of jobs changing.
Exactly. We'll need people who can design and maintain these complex 3D printing machines, as well as people who can create the software that powers them.
So it's less about learning the code and more about learning to like 3D print code.
Something like that. The point is, we need to be investing in education and training programs that equip people with the skills they need to thrive in this new landscape.
Okay, I'm with you. So we've covered jobs. What about data security? I mean, we're talking about digital blueprints for physical objects, right? What's to stop someone from like stealing a design or printing counterfeit goods?
That's a huge issue, especially when you consider the value of intellectual property.
Right, because those digital design files, those CAD files, they're valuable.
Exactly. So we need to make sure those files are protected just as rigorously as any other sensitive data.
So we're talking cybersecurity for the physical world, essentially.
Exactly. Companies will need to invest in robust cybersecurity measures to prevent their designs from being stolen or tampered with.
And what about like regulations? Are there any laws in place to deal with this kind of stuff?
It's still early days, but we'll probably see new legal frameworks emerge to address the unique challenges posed by 3D printing. Like, how do you enforce intellectual property rights when anyone can potentially reproduce a design?
Right, that's a good point. It's like every aspect of this technology has these ripple effects. Changing not just how we make things, but how we think about ownership and what a product even is.
Exactly. And it's not just about the legal stuff either. There are ethical considerations too.
Like what?
Well, one thing that comes up a lot is the idea of democratized manufacturing. If anyone can print anything, does that mean we'll see a shift in power from corporations to consumers?
Oh, interesting. So like instead of being at the mercy of what big companies decide to sell us, we could potentially just make whatever we want ourselves.
Exactly. It's a really interesting concept to think about.
So we're not just talking about like a shift in production. We're talking about like a fundamental shift in how we think about like consumption and creation. Ownership even.
Absolutely. It's like taking that whole DIY ethos and like putting it on. Fast forward, suddenly, anyone with a 3D printer and an internet connection can become a micro-manufacturer.
Okay, but that also sounds kind of chaotic. Like, what about quality control, safety standards? I mean, if everyone's a manufacturer, how do we make sure things don't, like, I don't know, explode?
That's where things get really interesting. Because we're going to need new systems, right? Like, imagine open source platforms where designs are vetted by the community with safety protocols built in.
So instead of relying on like government agencies or big corporations to set standards, we could see a more like decentralized, community-driven approach.
Exactly. It's like we're rewriting the rulebook on how we regulate stuff in the digital age.
It's kind of like we're staring out at this uncharted territory and we're like drawing the map as we go.
In a lot of ways, yeah. And that's what makes this whole thing so fascinating. But it's also a little unnerving, right? Because there are going to be things we can't even anticipate.
Okay, so give me an example, just to get those paranoia gears turning.
Well, what thing that keeps some experts up at night is the potential for 3D printing to be used for, let's just say, less than savory purposes.
Okay, you've officially piqued my curiosity. We're not talking about printing counterfeit concert tickets here, are we? This sounds more serious.
Think about it. If you can print anything, you can print weapons, potentially even undetectable ones, or think about like counterfeit pharmaceuticals, fake currency.
Okay, yeah, that's officially moved from thought-provoking to kind of creepy. It's like any powerful technology, there's always the potential for it to be used for bad stuff.
Exactly. And that's why it's so important to be having these conversations now. Before these technologies become even more widespread, we need to be thinking about ethical guidelines, safety protocols, and yeah, even regulations to make sure that 3D printing is used for good, not for harm.
It's a lot to think about, and honestly, it's a little overwhelming. Where do we even begin?
I think it starts with awareness. Just by understanding the potential benefits and risks of this technology, we can start to have more informed conversations about how to shape its development and use responsibly. And that's something that involves everyone, not just the tech people.
Right, it's not just about the technology itself, but about how we as a society choose to use it.
Exactly. It's about making conscious choices. Yes, choices that align with our values. It's a journey, not a destination. Yeah,
We're all figuring this out as we go.
that's a great way to put it. And it's what makes this whole thing so exciting. We're on the cusp of a technological revolution, and it's up to us to make sure it's a revolution that benefits everyone.
Well said. Well, I think we've covered a lot of ground today. We've gone from printing plastic toys to potentially printing human organs. It's been quite a ride.
It has been fascinating. Thanks for having me.
Thank you for being here and for sharing your expertise with us. So I hope you'll join us next time for another deep dive into a topic that's shaping our future. Until then, keep those curiosity gears turning